Hello, everybody. Welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper reading. Today, we shall be analyzing the Hindu newspaper dated 13th of December 2018 of the New Delhi edition. The topics to be discussed today has been presented on the screen. The time stamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Let us begin our today's discussion. This particular article appears on page number 13. The title of the article is Index of Industrial Production Rises to 11-month High in October. This particular article has appeared in the newspaper in the context of the release of the IIP and the Consumer Price Index data by Central Statistical Organization. Hence, this article becomes important mainly from the perspective of prelims under the subsection Indian economy. Further, this particular article also becomes important because, as you can see here, in previous year UPSC prelims, questions have been asked with respect to IIP, CPI, as well as the 8 core industries. Hence, as part of this video analysis, we will understand the basic details related to the Consumer Price Index and Index of Industrial Production. We will be covering basic aspects of these indices, such as who calculates these indices, how the indices are being calculated, and the weightage of different commodities in these indices. Further, we'll also understand the differences between the Consumer Price Index and the Wholesale Price Index. So let us start our discussion with basic understanding related to Consumer Price Index. The Consumer Price Index is one of the most important indicators to measure the rate of inflation in India. And as the name suggests, this particular indicator tracks the changes in the prices paid by the consumers to measure the rate of inflation. This particular indicator highlights the macroeconomic stability of India, and it is used by the Reserve Bank of India to control the rate of inflation, which means to say that the RBI decides on the policy rates based upon the CPI rate of inflation. And under the present monetary policy framework, the RBI is required to maintain a rate of inflation of 4%, which can either increase or decrease by plus or minus 2%, which means to say that the rate of inflation has to be maintained between 2 to 6%. It is to be noted here that the RBI used to target the WPI to control inflation. However, now the RBI is targeting the Consumer Price Index. Further, the CPI is measured by the Central Statistical Organization, which works under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. It is to be noted here that CSO also calculates the GDP in India. And presently, there are 3 different variants of Consumer Price Index. These variants being CPI Rural, CPI Urban, and CPI Combined. And out of these 3 variants, the Reserve Bank of India is basically targeting the CPI Combined. Presently, the base year for the calculation of Consumer Price Index is 2012. However, the base year earlier was 2004-5. And the Consumer Price Index is released by CSO every month. And for the measurement of Consumer Price Index, we use the point-to-point basis, wherein the prices in the current month are compared with the corresponding month of the previous year to calculate the rate of inflation. Let's understand this by an example. The weighted average prices for the base year is always considered to be 100. And let's say the weighted average of prices in November 2013 is 110. And that in November 2014 is 121. So to measure the rate of inflation in November 2014, we compare this particular price with the prices in November 2013, and accordingly we arrive at a rate of inflation of 10%, which means to say that to measure the rate of inflation in November 2018, we compare the prices with the prices in November 2017. Now coming to the categories for which the Consumer Price Index is calculated. Presently it comprises of the commodities covered under the food and beverages, pan, tobacco and intoxicants, clothing and footwear, housing. However, with respect to housing, it is to be noted that the housing prices are accounted only under CPI Urban and CPI Combined, and they are not accounted under the CPI Rural. The next is fuel and light, and lastly miscellaneous. And the miscellaneous category measures the rate of inflation in various services such as education, healthcare, transport and communication, etc. Further, it is to be noted that there are 2 types of inflations, that is headline inflation and the core inflation. When we measure the rate of inflation in all of these categories, it is referred to as the headline inflation, which means to say that the CPI combined itself is the headline inflation. However, if we exclude the volatile commodities such as food and fuel from the calculation of CPI combined, then such a rate of inflation is referred to as the core inflation. One important point which you can infer from this particular concept is that whenever there is a decline in food and fuel prices in India, the headline inflation would reduce by much higher margin as compared to the core inflation. This is because the headline inflation would take into account the decline in food and fuel prices, whereas the core inflation does not take into account the decline in the prices of these commodities. Further, the consumer price index is a weighted average of the changes in the prices of all these categories. Wherein to calculate the consumer price index, the Central Statistical Organization assigns weightage to each of these categories. And presently, the highest weightage has been assigned to the category of food and beverages, and the lowest weightage has been assigned to the category of pan, tobacco, and intoxicants. So, these are some of the basic details which one must know with respect to consumer price index. Let us now look at what has happened to the consumer price index for the month of November 2018 and also understand the differences between the consumer price index and the wholesale price index. The headline inflation for the month of November 2018 is around 2.33%, and this rate of inflation is considered to be lowest in the last 17 months. This lower rate of inflation is being attributed to the decline in the food and fuel prices, wherein there has been broad-based decline in the prices of pulses, sugar, eggs, vegetables as well as the fuel prices. However, one main concern is that the core inflation, which does not take into account the decline in the food and fuel prices, is still higher at 5.7%. Now, this particular image here has been taken from the press release of the Central Statistical Organization, and you can clearly see here the consumer food price index has turned into negative category, wherein the rate of inflation in the food commodities is around minus 2.61%. Now, because of the drastic fall in the prices of food commodities, the CPI general has reduced to 17th-month low of 2.33%. Now, this decrease in the rate of inflation becomes very important for the Indian economy because the RBI is presently following the policy of calibrated tightening, under which the RBI would either keep their policy rates constant or increase the policy rates. Now, this particular policy has been adopted by the RBI in the anticipation that the rate of inflation would increase in future. However, looking at the present inflation trends, the inflation is on the lower side. So, the RBI may reduce the policy rates in the future. So, let us wait and watch as to what would be the outcome of the next Monetary Policy Committee meeting with respect to the policy rates. Now coming to the differences between the wholesale price index and the consumer price index. The wholesale price index is calculated by the Office of Economic Advisor, which works under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. However, as discussed, the CPI is calculated by Central Statistical Organization under the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. And under the WPI, there are mainly three categories, which includes primary articles, manufactured products, and fuel and power. On the other hand, as we have discussed under the CPI, there are six categories. Further, under the WPI, the highest weightage has been given to the manufactured products. However, under the CPI, the highest weightage has been assigned to the food and beverages category. And one important difference between WPI and CPI is that the WPI does not account for the inflation in services. However, the same is accounted under the CPI. And the base year for both WPI and CPI is 2012. And both WPI and CPI are released every month. And lastly, as we have discussed, the RBI is targeting the consumer price index and not the wholesale price index. So these are some of the differences between the wholesale price index and consumer price index. Now let us understand certain basic details related to the index of industrial production. The index of industrial production is an indicator that measures the short-term changes in the volume of production of a basket of industrial goods for a given period. It is to be noted here that the IIP does not measure the changes in the prices of industrial goods. Rather, it measures the changes in the volume of production of the industrial goods. Further, only the goods are taken into account, whereas the services are not accounted under the IIP. This particular index is calculated by the Central Statistical Organization, wherein the present base year is 2011-12. However, the base year earlier was 2004-5. And just like Consumer Price Index, the IIP is released every month. And IIP is considered to be one of the most important parameter in India because it measures the level of industrial activity every month. And this particular data is used by various government agencies such as the Ministry of Finance, the RBI, as well as it is also used for measuring the gross value addition. Now coming to the categories and their weightage under the IIP. Now the categories of the IIP can be seen under two perspectives, one under the sectoral composition and another under the use-based classification of different goods. And as you can see here, under the sectoral composition, there are mainly three sectors: mining, manufacturing and electricity. And the highest weightage has been given to the manufacturing. With respect to use-based classification, it mainly covers 6 types of different goods. The primary goods are those goods which are directly obtained from the natural resources and are used for further processing. An example of primary goods would be the mineral ores. On the other hand, the intermediate goods are the manufactured products which are incomplete and are used as input for further production. Example being plywood, steel pipes, etc. Capital goods are those goods which are used for making further investments or may be used for the production of other goods. Examples being transformers, boilers, etc. Infrastructure or construction goods, as the name suggests, these are the goods which are mainly used in the construction industry, such as paint, cement, etc. Consumer durable goods are those goods which are directly used by the consumer and usually have a longer durability of more than 2 to 3 years. Examples being air conditioner, TV, mobile phones, etc. On the other hand, consumer non-durables are those goods which are directly used by the consumer but they cannot be preserved for a longer period of time. Example being milk, sugar, tea, etc. And as you can see in this particular table, the highest weightage has been given to the primary goods and the lowest weightage has been given to the capital goods. So these are some of the aspects which one must know with respect to index of industrial production. Based upon the discussion which we had so far, these questions would be your prelims questions for the practice. Please pause this video and try to find answer to these questions. We will be discussing the answers after 5 seconds. The first question here is, consider the following statements related to the headline and core inflation. The first statement is the headline inflation is more broad-based than core inflation. As we have discussed, this particular statement is correct. This is because the headline inflation takes into account the inflation in food and fuel prices. The second statement reads as, the decline in food and fuel prices affects both headline and core inflation equally. Now this particular statement is wrong. This is because the core inflation is not much affected by the decline in food and fuel prices. Hence the correct answer to this question is A, that is 1 only. Now coming to question number 2. The question here is, which among the following categories of goods has the highest weightage under the IIP? And as we have discussed, the answer to this question is primary goods, that is B. The third question here is, consider the following statements related to CPI. The first statement is, it takes into account the inflation in both goods and services. This statement is correct. The second statement is, the fuel and light category under the CPI has the highest weightage. Now this particular statement is wrong. This is because the food category has the highest weightage. The third statement is, the CPI rural does not account for the inflation in the housing category. And as we have discussed, this statement is correct. So looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is C, that is 1 and 3 only. The fourth question here is, consider the following statements related to WPI. The first statement is, it is calculated by CSO. This statement is wrong because it is calculated by the Office of Economic Advisor. The second statement is also wrong because the WPI assigns the highest weightage to the manufactured products. However, as we have discussed, the third statement is correct. So the correct answer to this question is C, that is 3 only. So having discussed all the aspects related to CPI, IIP and WPI, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears on page number 5. The title of the article is Supreme Court asks Center and Karnataka to respond on Mekedatu. This particular article shall be important from the perspective of prelims under the subsection Current Events of National Importance. Now, this particular article has appeared in the newspaper because the Karnataka government intends to build a multi-purpose project known as Mekedatu project across the river Kaveri, for which it had submitted a detailed project report to the Center Water Commission. And based upon the DPR submitted by the Karnataka government, the Central Water Commission had given the approval or the go-ahead to the Karnataka government on the Mekedatu project. However, this approval given by the Central Water Commission has been challenged by the Tamil Nadu government before the Supreme Court, wherein the Tamil Nadu government had stated that the Mekedatu project would go against the final award of the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal. In this regard, as the article here suggests, the Supreme Court has now asked the centre as well as the Karnataka government to respond to the petition filed by the Tamil Nadu government. In this regard, let us understand certain basic details related to the Mekedatu project as well as the arguments and counter-arguments put forward by the Karnataka and Tamil Nadu governments. The Mekedatu is a deep gorge which is situated at the confluence of the river Kaveri with its tributary Arkavati. This deep gorge is located in Ramnagar district of Karnataka. Now at this particular place, the Karnataka government intends to build a multi-purpose project in order to solve the drinking water problem of Bangalore as well as the Ramnagar district, as well as it also intends to generate the electricity. The government of Tamil Nadu has basically raised three concerns with respect to Mekedatu project, wherein the Tamil Nadu government has highlighted that the Mekedatu project would adversely affect the natural flow of the river Kaveri and it would severely affect the irrigation in Tamil Nadu. Further, the Tamil Nadu government has argued that the construction of Mekedatu project is against the final award of the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal. The government of Tamil Nadu has also stated that the Karnataka government has taken a unilateral action of constructing the Mekedatu project without even consulting the other riparian states. On the other hand, the Karnataka government has argued that it would continue to supply the mandated amount of water as per the Kaveri Water Disputes Tribunal to the government of Tamil Nadu, and the Karnataka government would be utilizing only the excess water after transferring the mandated amount. Hence, the Karnataka government has argued that the extra use of water would not affect the mandatory allocation of water to Tamil Nadu. Further, the Karnataka government has also highlighted that it had submitted a detailed project report for the Mekedatu project which has been accepted by the Central Water Commission. And as we have discussed before, the Supreme Court has sought the opinion of the central government and the Karnataka government on this particular issue. So let us wait and watch as to what would be the outcome on the petition filed by the Tamil Nadu government. So these are some of the aspects which one must know with respect to the Mekedatu project. Based upon the discussion which we had so far, this would be a prelims question for the practice. Please pause this video and try to find answer to this question. We will be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. The question here is, consider the following statements related to Mekedatu project. The first statement here is, it is a multi-purpose project to be built by Karnataka government on the river Krishna. This particular statement is wrong because the project is to be built over river Kaveri. The second statement reads as, the project has become bone of contention between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. This particular statement is correct. So looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is B, that is 2 only. With this, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears on page number 10. This particular article talks about a bill known as the Dam Safety Bill, which was recently introduced in the Lok Sabha. Hence, this particular article shall be important from the perspective of GS Paper 2, Governance, under the subsection Government Policies and Interventions. As part of this video analysis, we shall basically focus on 3 aspects. Firstly, we'll understand the need for the Dam Safety Bill, the benefits of having such a bill, and the salient features of the Dam Safety Bill. Let us start discussing these aspects of the article one by one. Now coming to the need for the Dam Safety Bill. Presently, India ranks third in terms of the number of large dams after US and China, wherein India has approximately 5,500 number of large dams. However, concerns have been raised with respect to maintenance of these large dams. This is because 75% of the large dams in India are more than 25 years old, and more importantly, around 160 dams are more than 100 years old. And these large dams are not properly repaired and maintained by the government on account of the lack of funds. Hence, these badly maintained dams can pose a danger to the human life and property. Further, there are also problems with respect to the institutional mechanism which has been set up to ensure the dam safety. Now, presently, these three organizations advise the Central Water Commission for ensuring dam safety. However, these three agencies are only recommendatory bodies, and more importantly, they do not enjoy statutory recognition under the law, which means to say that these three agencies are not suitably empowered to ensure the dam safety in India. Now, coming to how the bill would improve the dam safety in India. Now, this particular bill would address all the issues related to the dam safety in India. For example, it provides for the regular inspection of dams. It lays down a comprehensive dam safety review. It ensures adequate funds to be maintained for repair and maintenance of dams. And it also lays down emergency action plan in order to improve the disaster preparedness. Let us now look into the salient features of this particular bill. The Dam Safety Bill aims to set up the National Committee on Dam Safety. This particular National Committee shall evolve dam safety policies and accordingly recommend the necessary regulations to ensure the dam safety in India. Apart from this National Committee, the Dam Safety Bill also proposes to set up the National Dam Safety Authority. The mandate of the National Dam Safety Authority would be to implement the policies and guidelines to ensure the dam safety. So, the National Committee on Dam Safety would be a recommendatory body, whereas the National Dam Safety Authority would be a implementation body. Further, the National Dam Safety Authority would be required to maintain a national level database of all the dams. And in event of any major dam failures, this particular authority is required to examine the causes of such failures. Further, this particular authority is also required to ensure that the states are following the policies and guidelines for the dam safety. And in case if the states do not follow these norms, this particular authority has been empowered to penalize the states for not following the standards. And this authority shall provide technical and managerial assistance to the states. Further, under the bill, all the states are required to set up the State Committee on Dam Safety. And this particular committee is required to carry out a surveillance, inspection, and maintenance of dams in the states. So, these are some of the aspects which one must know with respect to the Dam Safety Bill. Based upon the discussion which we had so far, this would be a prelims question for the practice. Please pause this video and try to find answer to this question. We will be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. The question here is, consider the following statements related to Dam Safety Bill. The first statement is, it proposes to establish the National Committee on Dam Safety to implement policies and guidelines for ensuring dam safety. Now, this particular statement is wrong. This is because the National Committee on Dam Safety is required to evolve the dam safety policies, and more importantly, this particular committee is a recommendatory body. However, the implementation of the dam safety is to be done by the National Dam Safety Authority. The second statement reads as, the bill provides for the constitution of the State Committee on Dam Safety. As we have discussed, this particular statement is correct. Hence, looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is B, that is 2 only. Thus, having discussed all the aspects related to the Dam Safety Bill, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears on page number 10. Now, this particular article highlights that the Rajya Sabha has passed a new bill known as the National Trust for the Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation and Multiple Disabilities Amendment Bill 2018. Hence, this particular article becomes important from the perspective of GS Paper 2 Governance under the subsection Government Policies and Interventions. Before analyzing this particular article, let us first understand the background. Earlier, the Parliament of India had passed an act known as the National Trust for the Welfare of Persons with Autism, Cerebral Palsy, Mental Retardation, and Multiple Disabilities Act 1999. This particular act was mainly enacted in order to ensure that the persons with disability are able to live independently, for which this particular act promotes measures for the protection of the people living with disability in case of the death of their parents. It also evolves procedures for the appointment of guardians or the people living with disability. And more importantly, in order to ensure the protection of the persons living with disability, it sets up a national trust for the welfare of persons with autism, cerebral palsy, mental retardation, and multiple disabilities. Now, this particular article here highlights that this particular act has been amended by the Rajya Sabha. Hence, as part of this video analysis, let us understand as to why this particular act was amended and what are the provisions of the new amended bill. To understand the provisions of the new amended bill, we first have to understand the provisions of the original 1999 Act. Now, under the 1999 Act passed by the Parliament, under this particular Act, the tenure of the chairperson and other members of the National Trust was up to 3 years or until the successor of the chairperson or other members has been appointed. Apart from that, the 1999 Act also provided that the chairperson and other members of the National Trust shall continue to remain in office even after their resignation until the time their successor is appointed. Now, these provisions of the 1999 Act related to the tenure as well as the resignation of the chairperson and members of National Trust created problems. And the problem here was that these provisions allowed the chairperson and other members to continue to remain in office even after the expiry of their 3 years tenure, which means to say that the chairperson and other members would continue to remain in office until a time a suitable person is appointed to such post. Hence, in this regard, this particular bill aims to fix this particular problem related to tenure and resignation of the chairpersons and members of the National Trust. Now, this particular bill provides that the tenure of the chairperson and other members of the National Trust shall be of 3 years, which means to say that the chairperson and other members shall not occupy office beyond their tenure of 3 years. Further, the bill provides that at least 6 months prior to the expiry of the term of the chairperson and members, the government should initiate action for filling up of the vacant post. Further, it provides that in event of resignation by the chairperson or the other members, the government should direct an officer of the appropriate level to discharge their functions. So these are the provisions which the bill proposes. So having discussed all the aspects related to the new amended bill, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears on page number 7. The title of the article is India Gets the Submarine Rescue System. This article shall be important from the perspective of prelims under the subsection Current Events of National Importance. This particular article has appeared in the newspaper because the Indian Navy has inducted its first deep submergence rescue vehicle. This particular vehicle has been bought by the Indian Navy from United Kingdom. This particular vehicle would be used to rescue the crew members from those submarines which are stranded under the water. Coming now to the features of the rescue vehicle, it can operate at a maximum depth of 650 meters and it has the ability to rescue up to 14 crew members. Further, it has a unique ability of being transported by an aircraft, and it also includes a remotely operated vehicle to provide immediate assistance to the crew members of a stranded submarine. The significance of this rescue vehicle can be gauged from the fact that presently the nature of operations undertaken by the submarines in India exposes them to inherent risk. In such an eventuality, the traditional methods of rescue at sea are ineffective. It is in this regard the rescue vehicle would help in rescuing the crew members of the submarine which is stranded under the water. Hence, the induction of the deep submergence rescue vehicle increases the possibility of a successful rescue by the Indian Navy. Now, these are some of the aspects which one must know with respect to the deep submergence rescue vehicle. Based upon the discussion which we had so far, this would be a prelims question for the practice. Please pause this video and try to find answer to this question. We will be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. The question here is, consider the following statements related to the deep submergence rescue vehicle which was recently inducted into Indian Navy. The first statement here is, the deep submergence rescue vehicle has been bought from Russia. Now this particular statement is wrong because as we have discussed, the rescue vehicle has been bought from United Kingdom. The second statement reads as, it can rescue the crew members from the submarines which are stranded under the water. And as we have discussed, this particular statement is correct. So looking at the options here, the correct answer to this question is B, that is 2 only. With this, let us now move to the next article. The next article appears on page number 7. The title of the article is, NSG must have its own air wing. This particular article shall be important from the perspective of GS paper 3, security, under the subsection various security forces and agencies and their mandate. This particular article has appeared in the newspaper because a parliamentary panel has recommended that the centre should take urgent steps to ensure that the National Security Guard is equipped with its own dedicated air wing. In this aspect, let us understand certain basic details related to the National Security Guard. The NSG is the Indian Special Forces Unit which has been set up for the counter-terrorism as well as anti-hijacking, and it works under the Ministry of Home Affairs. The NSG was set up in 1984 following the Operation Blue Star as well as the assassination of Indira Gandhi. And you need to note here that NSG doesn't have a dedicated cadre of its own. Instead, the NSG is dependent upon the deputation of personnel from Army as well as the Central Armed Police Forces. Now, as the title of this particular article suggests, the parliamentary panel has suggested that the NSG should have its own air wing. Now, this becomes extremely important because during the 26/11 Mumbai attacks, there was a delay in the arrival of NSG in Mumbai, and this was attributed to lack of dedicated aircraft for the NSG. So the parliamentary panel here has suggested that the lack of dedicated air wing has curtailed the NSG's rapid reaction capabilities, and accordingly it has suggested that the NSG should have its own air wing. So these are some of the aspects which one must know with respect to this particular article. Based upon the discussion which we had so far, this would be a prelims question for the practice. Please pause this video and try to find answer to this question. We will be discussing the answer after 5 seconds. The question here is, consider the following statements related to the National Security Guard. The first statement here is, the NSG is a premier agency for carrying out the counter-terrorism and anti-hijacking operations in India. And as we have discussed, this particular statement is correct. The second statement reads as, the NSG works under the Ministry of Defence. Now this particular statement is wrong because as we have discussed, the NSG is part of the Ministry of Home Affairs. Hence the correct answer to this question is A, that is 1 only. With this, we have come to end of today's discussion. Now let us look at the question for the day.